Man, I can't believe I had to change the font size for that. Stupid overlong titles. I recently got into League of Legends, and I'm enjoying myself. It's very accessible and easy to understand, it's got a nice art style, but what I really like is the lore. The developers didn't have to do this, but they put so much effort into building the fictional world of Valoran and each individual champion in it. So much, in fact, that several of the champions could very well be protagonists of their own games. Here, I'm going to count the ones that had the best chances of succeeding in their own standalone game. There's a lot of criteria for something like that. These champions have to have a lore that would be interesting to expand upon, they have to be able to actually be a story's protagonist, their abilities and skills have to translate into a genre other than MOBA, and actually be fun. Let's get started. You all know those arrogant egomaniacs that are boasting to everyone about how absolutely El Chizo Supremo they are, and more often than not they are angering you with their inflated egos? Well, Draven is not that character.
Who wants some Draven?
Instead of being annoying, Draven manages to be a special kind of endearing. He makes a total joyride out of killing and executing his foes, and we just can't help but have fun along with him. That sort of joyful, sadistic glee can really translate over into the protagonist of a video game. As for what game he should have, well, I'm thinking some sort of beat 'em up with a twist. I'm thinking sort of like the Riddler challenges in the Batman Arkham games, but with weapons. At the end of the rounds, Draven's rated on how stylishly and diversely he executed all of his opponents and gets bonuses based on that. As for his story, in his lore, Draven was an executioner. He would execute prisoners and make a show out of it. As he got more praise, Draven would get cockier and gave his targets more options and advantages. I'm thinking that as he progresses throughout the game, his executions get more creatively challenging. This would be a good excuse to include his brother Darius, who would offer commentary on Draven's actions. Setting's pretty easy. Since Draven's job as an executioner, the arena would be a stadium or coliseum, and every level has stage hazards, such as fire, spikes, traps, bottomless pits. Hey, it's a video game, don't question it. Here's the thing about Jax. His lore states that he is such a good fighter that he was forced to use a lamppost by the League summoners just to make fighting him fair. He was limited in order to not make him overpowered. The question I ask is, what if he wasn't limited? What if he could use any weapon? You probably know where I'm going with this. For Jax, I was thinking to have him in some sort of Mad World-like game, but with an arcade twist. He starts off unarmed and fighting weaker foes. As he defeats them, he picks up their weapons and gets better. That prompts to send in more foes with better weapons, and the cycle continues. I was thinking he could use weapons like spears, swords, axes, staves, halberds, claws, whips, chains, you name it. And as the fights go on, he could potentially destroy much of his environment. I think it would be interesting if he could utilize his environment by picking up anything he finds, such as debris, sticks, etc.
What's that? I'll kill you with my teacup.
This was tricky, but I think I figured out a game concept that works for Soraka. Soraka was once a celestial being, but shed her immortality to help people who were sick, injured, or in need. The game would center around Soraka traveling across Valoran and helping people. Since she's an inherently quick champion, she could be traveling very quickly across lush landscapes and fields. However, there's a twist. One other champion, Warwick, is out for her blood so he can satisfy his selfish ambitions. With him as an addition to the game, we can create an interesting risk for the player. This would make the genre a sort of pseudo-psychological horror game. Soraka's objectives are to heal people and help them, while also trying to evade and flee Warwick. For every person she helps and draws attention to herself, she also gets Warwick's attention. If Warwick appears, Soraka has to hide, fight him off, or evade him while also trying to heal people. Soraka would have to balance saving people while also trying to save herself. We could even create some ethical dilemmas where Warwick threatens to kill people if Soraka doesn't surrender, and she doesn't, so Warwick butchers and tortures innocents with grisly and sadistic glee, forever damaging Soraka's fragile psyche, and we could witness her spiral into a vortex of hopeless— What is wrong with me? In League of Legends, Shurima is basically Egypt. Everything about champions there just screams Egyptian influence. They even have their own pharaoh, Azir, and I think he has the potential to star in his own game. Azir's objective is to rebuild his kingdom of Shurima to its former glory. That's not enough to carry a game completely by itself, but since Azir is a sort of warrior king, we can work with this. Have Azir actually fight things, all the while ordering troops on the battlefield to do the same. However, we also have to balance city/country management with the exploration and combat. I think Azir would really benefit from this sort of hybridization of games. Given the area, we could certainly have a lot of interesting options for boss battles such as Medusa, King K. Rool, Sonic, Majinar, the Graboid, and Sad Emotep.
I know, I'm horrible.
Jinx needs to be the star of a sandbox game set in Piltover. I'm talking like part Saints Row, part Just Cause, part Payday. Your job as Jinx is to spread as much chaos and anarchy as possible in the lawful neutral town of Piltover. Her missions would be heists, stealing as much money and causing as much chaos as possible, all the while evading capture. We have plenty of setup here for Jinx's opponents. Caitlyn, the no-nonsense police sniper, could very easily be a difficulty for Jinx in avoiding getting sniped. Vi, the reformed delinquent and resident bad cop, would be a difficulty in that she punches first, asks questions later, and doesn't think through the consequences of her actions. It would be fun to see Jinx outwit and dupe Vi like she so often has. Overall, Jinx just looks like a character that's fun to play. She's funny, crazy, violent, and every second she's on screen she looks like she's having a blast. And since she's also insane, it would be interesting to have a few levels set in her psyche. Or maybe have that color the entire game. Have that be the way she sees the world, which could create some very interesting levels and visuals. I know water levels have a very bad stigma to them. More often than not, they completely change how the games work for these segments only. But I've noticed that games often seem to be better when the water is given a larger focus in the game instead of just a select focus. So for that reason, I say give Nami a shot at starring in her own game. Nami is part of a race of pseudo-mermaids that rely on a moonstone to ward off quote-unquote terrors of the deep. The Moonstone is supposed to be exchanged for an abyssal pearl retrieved by a chosen hero, but one hasn't been found. Nami, tired of all the thumb twiddling, says screw it and goes to get the pearl herself. There's a little blurb of lore that states it took her 6 days to do it, so I want to ask, what happened during those 6 days? Yes, her lore does mention she was fighting off underwater terrors, but that can't be the only thing. Surely there was some exploration she had to do. I honestly want to see a game fully based on underwater exploration and combat. There are certainly many creative venues to explore. There's a ton of very strange and interesting phenomena that happens under the water's surface, especially considering we still don't have the entire ocean and all of its creatures mapped out. Ultimately, I think Nami's lore and goals are rich enough to carry a game, and it would be nice to have a game completely focused on water instead of just shoehorned in for no point whatsoever. I would describe Ezreal as Link meets Indiana Jones.
Now, does that concept alone not sound like a cool video game?
Ezreal is a treasure hunter slash cartographer. However, unlike Link and Indiana Jones, Ezreal's skills are completely magic based. Ezreal found a magical amulet that gave him special magical powers. There's plenty we can branch off from here. I'm envisioning some sort of treasure hunting platformer like Jak and Daxter, filled with plenty of collectible goodies. Ezreal is already combat focused, so giving him some combat in the form of some short range projectile fighting and some melee shouldn't be too difficult. However, we're going to put a Zelda-y twist on it. As Ezreal searches and treasure hunts, he finds different kinds of magical spells that allow him to do different things, such as magically creating grappling hooks, things to help him scale walls, etc. His personality is also a lot of fun, considering he apparently subverts some natural protagonist tropes. Oh, he's still cocky like many protagonists, but unlike others, he apparently doesn't enjoy the attention. Since this would be an exploration slash collectibles game, it would also be interesting to have an excuse to explore the towns of Valoran. Piltover would be fine as a second or third level, and we could even see him interact with Caitlyn, one of his friends. Demacia would also be a good one because he could interact with Lux, another one of his friends. Next number.
Everyone, if you haven't seen Curse of the Sad Mummy yet, Stop my countdown and go watch it right now. No, I'm serious. Stop my countdown, pause it, go watch Curse of the Sad Mummy. I'll even put an annotation right there. Okay, click on that, pause my countdown, and go watch this and come back. Don't worry, I'll be waiting. You done? Okay. Now, put that trailer in front of an indie game developer and tell me they wouldn't be frothing at the mouth.
Amumu's backstory and all of these visuals scream artsy indie game. I'm not being ironic here, I'm dead serious. Doesn't this trailer look a lot like the love child of Journey, Limbo, and American McGee's Alice? And there we go, that's our game! A platformer slash exploration game with some light combat that delves into the psyche of a mummy destined to be alone and unhappy for eternity using environmental storytelling, symbolism, and zany Wonderland visuals. This is artsy fartsy gold! As games have evolved, the role of the protagonist has also shifted. With games like Grand Theft Auto, Prototype, and God of War, sometimes you get to play as someone who's not necessarily a good guy. Sympathetic maybe, but definitely not a good guy. That's why I want Diana to have a shot in her own game. Diana was born and raised among a cult of sun worshippers, but she always found the moon more interesting. Her ideas were deemed heretical and she was sentenced to death, but she gained power from the moon and slaughtered her executioners, declaring war on the Solari. This sort of game sounds a lot like God of War, and that's the exact kind of angle I want to have for Diana's game. Have her slowly off the leaders of the Solari one by one until finally reaching Leona. All throughout the game, she is gaining more power from the moon, and perhaps even new weapons and abilities. I think that if Diana gets her own game, we can expand upon the lore of moon worshippers. Perhaps let Diana slowly grow her own cult, maybe even start a lunar republic. Okay, point is, there's a lot of potential here for Diana that you just don't have with other champions. She can be a great villain protagonist, and her lunar abilities can make for some creative combat and visuals. I'm more of a sun person myself, but that doesn't mean I still wouldn't play this kind of game.
She was everything to me. But they took her. And with her, they took my kindness and my mercy. That was their mistake. Because now, all I've got left is a cold heart. They thrive on doubt. They feast on fear. These wretched abominations blight this world, and every last one of them will perish by my hand.
Tell me that doesn't sound like the intro to a video game. In the same vein of games like Devil May Cry or Van Helsing, you can make an entire game based around Lucian's struggle to get revenge on Thresh. If story isn't your thing, Lucian slays undead people with laser guns. If that hasn't hooked you yet, well, perhaps we can give him some other similar weapons. His lore is actually really flexible. Besides weapon potential, Lucian has shown he has great acrobatic abilities, which can make for a really nice and flashy hack and slash game. The Shadow Isles themselves are a gold mine of creative ideas for undead eldritch abominations for Lucian to fight. Thresh is an obvious final boss, but there are plenty of other Shadow Isles residents that could be normal bosses. Callisto would be an interesting first boss for him to fight under a misunderstanding. Seeing as she's a spirit of vengeance, she could become a potential ally, or since she's technically undead, Lucian could slay her without remorse. Elise would be a creepy boss since video games love to have their spider bosses. Karthus might be a good semi-final boss. Hecarim might be a fun boss incorporating his speed. Oh, and imagine the fight with Mordekaiser.
I like my weapons how I like my music. Heavy and metal.
Hey, I like the concept of a musical battle. Sue me.
If any other character doesn't get their own game, Lucian needs a spin-off. His lore is a fountain of creativity. His gameplay translates well, he's got plenty of interesting characters to fight with and against, and he's an interesting character.
I'm the fiery Joker, and now no one can accuse me of being racist.
Cut!
darkness, impending doom. The scrolls on the tree, a somber gloom. Run as you will, you cannot escape. The darkness pursues, embrace now your fate. The cost of your cowardice you cannot afford. Hide from the shadows or fall on your sword.
Your night's just beginning, this hour you face. My craving for fear, I've acquired the taste. Your strength shall abandon, your speed shall abate. For 400 years I've been lying in wait. My form made beautiful, I now seek to bind. In my web of deception, you're now intertwined. The sound of the strings entice you to me. Together, forever, embraced we shall be.
The moon turns crimson.